So welcome everybody to the Early Researchers Seminar Series, which is being hosted by the Cambridge Reproduction SRI. And first of all, a big thank you to the volunteers who are organizing this series, and of course to our lineup of fantastic speakers that are going to make this come to life. So as today, the seminars will be held online, always on the second Thursday of each month at 1 p.m. And the details can be found on the Reproduction SRI website, which I think Christina will be posting the link to in the chat. So if you want to just take note of that. So yeah, the Cambridge Reproduction SRI is an interdisciplinary initiative, and it brings together researchers from all across the university who have a broad interest in reproduction. It could be everything from science, technology, medicine, but also from arts and humanities. So if you're interested, the membership is open to all staff and postgraduate students. And if you decide to join, you get access to all the SRI events, the funding schemes, the regular newsletters, research highlights, and so on, which is all really useful. So to join, you can just again visit the website and find the membership form, download it, fill it in, and email it to Christina. And I think the link for that is now also in the chat box. Yeah, and if any postgraduate students or postdocs would like to take part in the seminar, please also contact Christina about that. We're going to move on to our second talk of today, which is by Kevin Glasgow. So Kevin is a PhD student currently at the Faculty of Education, and he is working on a project led by Sarah Leigh Fox at the Department of Psychology, which is the Cocopepe study, and which addresses parental experiences during pregnancy and the early perinatal period during COVID. So his talk is entitled Pregnancy in a Pandemic, Giving Voice to Expecting and New Parents.
As mentioned, my name is Kevin Glasgow. I'm a PhD candidate at the Department for Education. And today I want to talk to you about pregnancy in a pandemic and specifically giving voice to expecting and new parents. If my slide will move on. Sorry, slight technical hitch. There we go. So to start with the obvious news that unless you've lived under a rock, you've probably not missed. On the 11th of March 2020, the World Health Organization confirmed the new SARS coronavirus as a pandemic. And this started a cascade of responses around the world, some of which are very relevant to the study, some of which are less so, but I will go into those in more detail. So throughout the pandemic, there's been many changes to guidelines and guidance, both to individuals and to organisations. Throughout this, though, the message has remained relatively consistent: stay at home with the aim to protect the NHS and also to save lives. Specifically, this stay at home has resulted in now multiple lockdowns. At the start of our study, we were only dealing with one lockdown. I think we're now into the third and hopefully final lockdown. So that's just the context of where we are, but it's all a lived experience for you, so I'm sure you understand. So in terms of the experience of new parents, this is not something that we're just talking about in scientific dialogue. The experience of parents and young people is a real lived experience that's shared throughout the country, if not the world. I know personally of people who have had babies during the pandemic. I also know friends whose close friends have been unable to see their newborn child in 12 months since the pandemic has started. And this has been a real change for what most parents tend to expect when they're expecting or alternatively have given birth. And that's had a real shockwave effect on society. This has spilled over into the media, where we're seeing articles in sites such as The Conversation, but also all across Twitter, with journalists and celebrities highlighting the importance of connection with your child and other people during the pandemic. So that's just a little bit of background. So the Cocopepe study, Cocopepe stands for COVID-19 in the context of pregnancy, infancy and parenting study. The study itself is made up of a lot more people than just me. I can't take credit for all of it. In fact, I can hardly take credit for very much, but nevertheless, I'm here to talk about it. But I have to give due credit to everyone involved in the team. Our PIs, Sarah Lloyd Fox, Mark Johnson, and Jane Barlow from the University of Oxford, Stacey myself, Ezra and Toppin have all been involved in the study, some from its conception and in my case, part of the way through. The study is a large study that has multiple strands in it, and I'm only going to talk about one, but I highly encourage people to look into the work of all of my colleagues because some of the branches that they're following down are really very exciting and important. So as I mentioned, the overall arching study is COVID in the context of pregnancy, infancy and parenting. However, specifically what I want to talk to you about today is a paper that's recently been released in Preprint, which I was one of the first authors on, which is Expectant Parents' Perception of Healthcare and Support During the COVID-19 Pandemic in the UK, a thematic analysis. And it's this part that I want to just draw attention to. This paper is specifically the paper that we're using to give voice to the women. Our study is, as I said, quite large in both qualitative and quantitative, and it's this paper specifically that looked into the qualitative responses of the mothers, fathers, and partners. So why is the research important? Well, I mean, there's so many reasons that I couldn't possibly go into all of them, but ultimately we are sociable people. And this sociable nature of human beings starts right from the minute we're born. So we learn excitement from caregivers, we learn communication from our caregivers, and these can be simple things like gestures, smiles, facial expressions, all of which of course have been interrupted, if not taken away, by the wearing of masks. And the national lockdowns themselves have also dramatically limited the extent of which a newborn and a parent can have social contact with those outside of their bubble, which a term we're now all familiar with. So we believe this is important both societally, but also from a research point of view, as fetal infant and infant development can be influenced by a variety of factors, which instigates a cascade which transfers right through biological life, affecting biology, physical and neurodevelopmental outcomes. Where's the button? There we go. So the two main things that we're looking at is that prenatal maternal stress and anxiety has been shown in the literature to influence fetal and infant development. And we've also noticed that early experiences are associated with later cognitive and social development outcomes in childhood. So the study design itself, as I mentioned, it is a large study and it is quite complex. So I'll try and go through it as simply as possible. The study uses a mixed methods design, which is both quantitative and qualitative. We're keen to quantifiably measure infant development, whilst also giving parents a voice, which is what I like to speak about. It's logic dependent and adaptive, and is survey based. It shows questions only relevant to the parent's current situation, and it can be joined at any of 3 time points, which is highlighted in red. So it can be in pregnancy at 0 to 3 and 3 to 6 months, and they're given an option here to opt in for to be contacted longitudinally and have their infant followed throughout up to an 18-month period of time. During pregnancy, we collect information around fetal growth and prenatal experience of the antenatal healthcare and support world. At 0 to 3 months, we collect information about infant social experience, as well as the postnatal healthcare and as parents about their experience of giving birth during the pandemic. And then we move on to 12 and 18 months, where as we ask parents to complete questionnaires about their child's social, cognitive, and language development. This is something where people can join at each individual stage, or alternatively will be followed if they choose to longitudinally from whichever stage they join in at. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. So the study aims, overall, the aim was to explore the economic and psychological adjustments of parents and potentially the influences these have on early parent-child interactions and physical growth and cognitive development of the infant. There are, however, 4 study aims. Aim 1, access to social, medical and financial support amidst the COVID-19 pandemic is associated with parental stress, anxiety and depression. Aim 2, COVID-19 related restrictions will moderate the depth and breadth of social interactions that young infants experience in the first 6 months of life. Aim 3, parental mental health and social interactions experiences will mediate physical, social and cognitive development in infants over the first year of their life. And finally, aim 4, fetal growth will interact with maternal mental health to predict variability in infant social, affective and cognitive development. So at the time of making this PowerPoint, we had 1,267 participants. Of that, 1,213 mothers, 28 fathers, 3 non-birth mothers, and 1 other partner. As you can see, we're really lucky with the number of participants we have. We're also really lucky in terms of the geographical spread we have. We have a very large range throughout the UK with most areas covered, but we also have an international cohort ranging from parts of Africa, Southeast Asia, and America as well. So we are really fortunate with that, and credit to those who have worked with us to help to distribute our questionnaire throughout the world. The survey is also open to any infant caregiver, not just the mother. To date, we've had about 400 parents complete the survey, and about 900 have completed between 0 to 6 months. And to date, we've had about 900 families consent to being followed up, which is really exciting. So hopefully we'll get to see those longitudinal results. And at this point, with this study starting in the spring last year, we're starting to already see some of the follow-up results coming in. So it is an ongoing project, but something that we are excited to see with the ongoing results coming in. So the paper that I'd like to speak to you about today is was our first paper that we have released as part of the project. And as I mentioned, it is out on preprint. I've put a QR code at the end, so if anyone wants to go and read the paper, please feel free to. That would be much appreciated. And the paper itself is titled Expectant Parents' Perception of Healthcare and Support During COVID-19 in the UK, a Thematic Analysis. And this perhaps marks a slight change from maybe some of the usual presentations that you'll be used to in the conference, in that it is a much more qualitative piece of work that we've been doing. My involvement started in it because I used thematic analysis in my education research, and so was brought into the team to work alongside them to carry out thematic analysis on this data. So the background, which I've just touched on already, a couple of important things. Antenatal and maternal services available to expectant parents have been reported as being affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. That's probably not overly surprising, but especially at the outset of the project, this was something that was becoming really noticeable very quickly. We've also found in the literature that regional variations affects levels of support throughout the UK. Birth partner attendance has also been a significant bone of contention, even reaching the national press, with rules changing regularly on a daily basis in some areas as to whether birth partners can or cannot be allowed during birth or during appointments. There's also very sadly been an increase in stillbirths during the pandemic. There's also been reported lack of care. And finally, there's also been significant reporting of anxiety and depression. This could, of course, be associated with many factors in the pandemic, but it has also been linked to the experience of pregnancy. It was all of these things that we were interested in exploring our data with, and that forms the basis of the paper. So the objective from that background was to examine how the COVID-19 pandemic and its societal related restrictions have impacted the provision of healthcare support for pregnant women during the COVID-19 pandemic. So we had 6 questions that were qualitative, and as I say, this paper was focusing on qualitative responses. The first question asking about support from your healthcare provider. Second, did you feel comfortable attending pregnancy appointments? Thirdly, do you feel talking to your midwife online has allowed you to ask the questions you wanted to? Fourth, we asked specifically about the experiences of COVID-19 in the general sense. 5, in your own words, we asked people to describe classes that they have attended, prenatal in this case of this paper, and then prior to birth, specifically, were you certain about whether partners or family members could be present for the birth? And let us know how this communication or advice from the hospital made you feel. So as you can see from these questions, we're really interested in finding out the experience of the women and the fathers potentially as well, and how did they feel about what was going on during their experience of pregnancy. So the methods we used was thematic analysis and sentiment analysis. As I'm new to the group, I'm not 100% sure how much thematic analysis appears in your sphere, but a really quick overview. Thematic analysis is a type of qualitative approach where you code data blindly without looking specifically before. You simply read it, familiarize yourself with it, read it, familiarize yourself with it continually until eventually themes start to elucidate from the data. At that point, you start to collect themes into hierarchy of themes, which hopefully will allow you to draw out some of the key concepts that appear throughout and can be represented by the responses. We also conducted a sentiment analysis, which is in the paper, where we essentially looked at every sentence to assess whether it was positive, neutral, or negative. To do that, I used in vivo, and for the sentiment analysis, originally used Atlas TI, but then ended up doing it again on in vivo and partly by hand. So the findings at the outset, we found that anxiety was quite often connected to healthcare support. We also found that there were quite a lot of changes to healthcare support. There was rushed and fewer appointments. There was reported lack of sympathy. There was restrictions on partners attending. There was a lack of face-to-face appointments. And finally, there was comments specifically relating to the use of PPE and the experience of that. What I'd like to do is go through and let the women who participated in the research do the talking for me. I'm obviously not in a position to comment on their experience. So instead, what we've tried to do with this paper is give voice, as the talk is titled, to the women who are involved. So what I'm going to do is present some quotations that are direct from the questionnaire explaining the findings that we have. So yeah, just a quick note, the results are in preprint, but just to acknowledge the fact that they are still being peer reviewed. So anxiety in relation to healthcare support. The participant felt that NHS decisions were not well communicated to expectant mums, so there was a lot of anxiety over rumours about what to expect during labour. Another participant had medical support but no emotional or mental health support during a time of great uncertainty. I should also mention at this point there are countless quotes that could be included. Many are very similar. I've tried to pick ones that best illustrate the variety of responses we had. We also had changes to healthcare support. I feel like a lot of appointments have been more rushed. I'm assuming due to limited exposure time due to COVID, etc. And I literally have no idea what to expect or what things even mean or are. I feel as though a lot of my concerns about my pregnancy are also shrugged off by midwives, etc. Although I don't think this is particularly COVID related. There was a reported lack of sympathy, with one participant saying, "My experience of the hospital where concerns were dismissed by a registrar and notes were lost, so I would turn up for appointments where they weren't expecting me. I felt bullied by the registrar who told me I am incapable of having babies." Another participant also said, "Generally good, but different midwife each time meant different levels of support and none sensitive to previous losses." There was also, as mentioned, a lot of restrictions on partners being able to attend both appointments and the birth. For this, we focused on prenatal, so on the experience of the appointments. Prior to this pregnancy, I've had 2 miscarriages. I've suffered with depression, anxiety, and panic attacks as a result. Every scan feels like they're going to tell me I've lost the baby again. My anxiety goes through the roof. I haven't felt comfortable or happy once on my own. Disappointed that partners have been excluded from all aspects of routine appointments too, so I feel very alone on the journey. As mentioned at the very start, infants rely on face-to-face interactions to develop, but we as adults also rely on face-to-face meetings in order to connect well with the people that we're trying to relate to. In terms of those lacking face-to-face meetings, one individual said, "I feel nervous about the lack of face-to-face appointments. I've been having at-home visits from an independent midwife. Our first son was stillborn at 22 weeks, so I feel I still need face-to-face appointments to check on the baby and me." Another participant, "Lack of personal interaction has been detrimental to my pregnancy and anxiety. I had one video call and it was shocking. The midwife wasn't able to listen to me or answer my questions. He appeared to just want to get me off the phone." Then moving on to the use of PPE, something we're all familiar with. By PPE, I don't just mean hospital grade PPE, but also the use of face masks, which we use throughout society currently. There were practical issues with face masks for pregnant women. Wearing a mask whilst pregnant is very hot and I get faint. There was also discussions about people not using PPE appropriately. I was mostly comfortable, although the one that took blood pressure did not wear a mask. There was also individuals alluding to the PPE crisis that happened throughout the pandemic, which has obviously spilled its way into the knowledge of those women who were in hospital. I was in my 9th month at the height of COVID. Info was erratic and PPE was scarce. Every time it was hard to know what was safe. So just before I go on to the thank yous, I just want to talk about what the implications of the study are. The implications have already started, and I hope that they will continue to. Along with our study and other studies throughout the country, hopefully what has happened through presenting or through pre-printing is a discussion starting to take place about the actual reality for women throughout the pandemic. The implications for this hopefully are that whilst I sincerely hope we're never in this situation again, that lessons can be learned about how to properly deal with the journey of pregnancy throughout a pandemic. The paper has also laid the foundation for our follow-ups. It's given us some themes to look out for. However, as I mentioned with thematic analysis, we do remain open to other themes. We have seen that themes have been changing as we go through. At this stage, it's too early to know. And I think importantly, I also just want to take this point to highlight something, which is that whilst all of these findings are really emotive and very important, it is worth also acknowledging that I am of the personal belief and hope that there are some positives to be found in amongst the pandemic. I don't want to present this with people assuming that my opinion is that everything was negative. However, I think practically when you ask people how they feel about something, quite often they are more likely to tell you what wasn't good rather than what was. Obviously, throughout the follow-ups, what we're hoping to see is through a period of reflection, maybe afterwards being able to start to pick out some of the positives as well that came from the work. So that's where the project's going. And finally, I just want to say thank you to my collaborators that I worked with. Thank you for their opportunity to work with them. And I've also included a QR code at the top in case anyone wants to go and read the preprint of the paper. And finally, if anyone has any questions, I'd love to answer them.